Before Syd Barrett helped create Pink Floyd, he was the band's heart and creative force. But the friendship that once brought the group together slowly fell apart, and Barrett eventually disappeared from both the band and the public eye. But many fans were surprised when the surviving members of Pink Floyd did not attend his funeral. Why did that happen? Was it because of bad feelings, or was there a very different reason behind the decision? Join us as we uncover why Pink Floyd didn't go to Syd Barrett's funeral and explore the truth behind one of rock music's most misunderstood stories. Syd Barrett, before Pink Floyd. Before Pink Floyd became one of the biggest rock bands in history, everything began with one person, Syd Barrett. He was the band's founder, first leader, main songwriter, and creative force during its earliest days. Long before the albums, sold-out concerts, and worldwide fame, Barrett was a young artist growing up in Cambridge, England, with a mind full of ideas that would eventually shape one of the most influential bands of the 20th century. Syd Barrett was born Roger Keith Barrett on January 6, 1946, in Cambridge. He grew up in a supportive family that encouraged creativity. His father, Arthur Barrett, was a respected pathologist and had a strong interest in education, while his mother, Winifred, supported Syd's artistic interests from an early age. Friends and family often described him as cheerful, curious, and full of energy. He enjoyed drawing, painting, and making music long before he ever thought about becoming a professional musician. The nickname Syd came during his childhood and stayed with him for the rest of his life. As he got older, he became known around Cambridge as someone with a unique personality. He wasn't interested in following trends. Instead, he liked creating things in his own way. That independent attitude would later become one of the biggest reasons Pink Floyd stood out from other bands. During his teenage years, Barrett became friends with several people who would later play important roles in his life. Roger Waters attended school in Cambridge, and although they were not always in the same class or social group, they knew each other through the local community and their shared interest in music. Barrett also became friends with David Gilmour, another talented young guitarist from Cambridge. Gilmour and Barrett spent time playing guitar together, exchanging musical ideas and admiring many of the same artists. At the time, none of them could have imagined how closely their futures would become connected. Cambridge in the early 1960s had a lively local music scene. Young musicians formed bands, played dances, and performed at local clubs whenever they had the chance. American blues and early rock and roll had become extremely popular in Britain, and many young players wanted to copy the sound of artists they admired. Barrett joined several local groups during these years, including Jeff Mott and the Mottos and Those Without. These early bands gave him valuable experience performing live and helped him grow as both a guitarist and songwriter. By the mid-1960s, Barrett had moved to London to attend art school. Around the same time, Roger Waters, Nick Mason, and Richard Wright were studying architecture in London while playing together in a band that went through several different names. Barrett eventually joined them, bringing a completely different creative direction. His songwriting, guitar playing, and artistic vision quickly transformed the group. Roger Waters, Nick Mason, and Richard Wright naturally looked to Barrett as the band's leader. He wrote most of the songs, made many of the creative decisions, and gave Pink Floyd its unique personality during its earliest years. Without Syd Barrett, the band that the world would later come to know might never have existed in the same form. But as Pink Floyd's popularity began to grow, the pressures of success started changing everything. The rise of Pink Floyd. By 1966, Pink Floyd had moved beyond being just another local band. Thanks largely to Syd Barrett's creativity, they were becoming one of the most talked about groups in London's growing underground music scene. Their sound was unlike anything most audiences had heard before. While many British bands were still focused on blues, rock and roll, or pop music, Pink Floyd was experimenting with long instrumental sections, unusual guitar effects, and lyrics that felt playful, mysterious, and imaginative. One of the band's biggest opportunities came when they became regular performers at the famous UFO Club in London. The club quickly became one of the most important places for psychedelic music in Britain. Crowds packed the venue to hear new bands experimenting with sound, while colorful light shows filled the room. Pink Floyd soon became one of the club's biggest attractions, As their reputation spread, Pink Floyd began playing at other well-known underground venues, such as the Roundhouse and various colleges and art schools around London. Music journalists started writing about the band, describing them as one of the most original acts emerging from Britain's psychedelic movement. Much of the credit went to Syd Barrett. At this stage, Barrett was responsible for nearly all of the band's songwriting. He wrote the majority of the songs that audiences came to hear, and his imagination shaped the group's identity. His lyrics stood out because they didn't follow the usual topics of popular music. Instead of focusing mainly on romance, Barrett wrote about fantasy, childhood memories, unusual characters, nature, and dreamlike situations. His songs felt playful on the surface, but often contained clever wordplay and unexpected ideas. Musically, Barrett was just as adventurous. He experimented with guitar sounds using echo, distortion, and slide techniques that helped create the band's signature style. Rather than showing off technical skill, he focused on creating interesting sounds that matched the mood of each song. The band's growing popularity soon attracted major record companies. In 1967, Pink Floyd signed with EMI, one of the biggest record labels in Britain. It was a major step forward. EMI had already worked with some of the country's biggest artists, including the Beatles, and signing with the label showed that the company believed Pink Floyd had serious commercial potential. With success came a demanding schedule. Pink Floyd found themselves balancing recording sessions, interviews, television performances, radio appearances, and constant touring. Life became far more structured than it had been only a year earlier. Deadlines, travel, and growing public attention placed increasing pressure on every member of the band. But as the months passed, those strange moments became more frequent, and the band slowly realized they were facing a problem they didn't fully understand. The warning signs were becoming impossible to ignore, and the next chapter would push the band to its breaking point, when things began to change. As Pink Floyd's success grew during 1967, people close to Syd Barrett began noticing changes that were becoming harder to ignore. At first, these changes seemed small. Barrett had always been creative, unpredictable, and different from most people around him. But over time, his behavior became more confusing, more frequent, and more difficult for his friends and bandmates to explain. To understand what happened, it's important to look at the world Barrett was living in. During the late 1960s, London's psychedelic scene was closely connected to the use of LSD. Many musicians, artists, and students believed the drug could expand the mind and inspire new ideas. LSD was often discussed openly within creative circles, and some people viewed it as part of artistic exploration rather than something dangerous. Pink Floyd's music naturally became associated with this movement. Their concerts featured experimental sounds and colorful light shows, and many fans assumed the band shared the same psychedelic lifestyle as their audience. Syd Barrett became one of the people most closely linked to that culture. Many friends and people who knew Barrett later said he appeared to use LSD more often than the other members of Pink Floyd. Several people who spent time with him during this period recalled repeated drug use, although there is no complete record of exactly how often it happened. Different accounts sometimes disagree on the details, but many point to heavy LSD use as an important part of the story. As the months passed, Barrett's personality appeared to change. Friends who had known him for years noticed that he no longer behaved like the cheerful and energetic young man they remembered from Cambridge. Instead of joining conversations or joking with people around him, he sometimes became unusually quiet. At social gatherings, he could suddenly withdraw from everyone without any clear reason. There were also moments when he seemed emotionally distant. People would try speaking to him, only to receive little or no response. Friends later described occasions when Barrett stared blankly into space for long periods, almost as if he were unaware of what was happening around him. Sometimes he answered questions very slowly. Other times, he simply remained silent. His bandmates found these changes especially worrying because they happened more and more often. The problems soon began affecting rehearsals. Pink Floyd depended on Barrett more than anyone else. He wrote most of the songs, sang lead vocals on many tracks, and played lead guitar. If he struggled during practice, the entire band struggled with him. Several stories from rehearsals have become well known over the years. On some occasions, Barrett reportedly stood playing a single chord over and over without moving on to the rest of the song. The other musicians would continue waiting for him to change, but he simply stayed on the same note. Sometimes this lasted several minutes before someone stopped the rehearsal. At other times, Barrett appeared unwilling to perform songs the way they had practiced them. He might suddenly change the rhythm, stop playing entirely, or introduce new parts that confused the rest of the band. Because Pink Floyd already performed experimental music, it was not always easy to tell whether Barrett was improvising or whether something was genuinely wrong. As these incidents became more common, rehearsals grew increasingly frustrating. Live performances also became unpredictable. Some nights, Barrett performed well enough that the band believed things were improving. On other nights, he seemed completely disconnected. This inconsistency made it difficult for the group to plan concerts or recording sessions because no one knew which version of Syd Barrett would arrive. Even today, there is still disagreement over what caused his decline. Many people believe heavy LSD use played a major role. Some friends argued that repeated drug use either damaged his mental health or made an existing condition much worse. Others believe the pressure of sudden fame, constant touring, and public attention also contributed to his struggles. Roger Waters, Nick Mason, Richard Wright, and later David Gilmour all admitted in different interviews that they struggled to understand what was happening to their friend. They could see that Barrett was changing, but they did not know why or how to help him. They tried encouraging him, working around his difficult days, and hoping things would improve. For a while, they believed the changes might pass. Instead, the situation continued getting worse, and before long, it would begin affecting every concert, every recording session, and the future of Pink Floyd itself. Soon, the band's biggest problem was no longer happening behind the scenes. It was unfolding in front of live audiences. The breaking point. By the end of 1967, Syd Barrett's struggles were no longer something that happened only during rehearsals or private conversations. They were becoming visible to audiences, television crews, music executives, and anyone who worked with Pink Floyd. What had once seemed like occasional unusual behavior was now affecting the band's ability to perform, record, and build on its growing success. For the rest of the band, this created an impossible situation. Pink Floyd was becoming more popular every month, but the person responsible for much of that success was becoming increasingly unreliable. One of the biggest problems appeared during live performances. Fans came expecting the exciting, imaginative concerts that had made Pink Floyd famous in London's underground music scene. Instead, they sometimes witnessed performances where Barrett barely seemed present. There were nights when he stood completely motionless on stage while the rest of the band played around him. Audience members waited for him to begin singing or playing guitar, but he remained still, often staring into the distance with a little expression on his face. Some people assumed it was part of the performance because Pink Floyd was already known for unusual stage shows. Others quickly realized that something was clearly wrong. On other occasions, Barrett played his guitar so far out of tune that it disrupted entire songs. Instead of correcting the problem, he sometimes continued playing as though nothing had happened. There were also performances where he barely played at all, leaving long stretches where only Roger Waters, Richard Wright, and Nick Mason carried the music forward. The unpredictability became one of the band's biggest challenges. Some concerts went reasonably well, giving everyone hope that Barrett might be recovering. Then, at the very next show, he might refuse to participate almost entirely. The band never knew what to expect when they walked onto the stage. There were also reports that Barrett occasionally forgot songs he had written himself. During performances, he sometimes appeared unable or unwilling to follow the arrangements the band had rehearsed. Songs that normally lasted a few minutes could suddenly change direction because Barrett introduced unexpected chords, different tempos, or completely unrelated guitar parts. For the other musicians, these moments required quick decisions. They often had to watch Barrett closely while trying to keep the performance together. Roger Waters sometimes adjusted his bass playing to match Barrett's unexpected changes. Richard Wright listened carefully for clues about where the song might go next, while Nick Mason tried to keep a steady rhythm even when the structure of the music began falling apart. Despite their efforts, there was only so much they could do. The problems also reached television audiences. During some broadcasts, however, Barrett's behavior drew uncomfortable attention. One of the most talked about appearances came during the promotion of See Emily Play. Viewers noticed that Barrett seemed detached and expressionless during the performance. Even though television shows often required musicians to mime their songs rather than perform live, Barrett appeared distant in a way that producers and crew members found unusual. People working behind the scenes reportedly became concerned because he seemed disconnected from what was happening around him. As more television appearances followed, similar concerns continued. Industry professionals who had once praised Barrett's originality now began quietly questioning whether he could continue working at the level the band required. Concert promoters also became nervous. When booking a touring band, promoters expected reliable performances. Pink Floyd's growing reputation made them an attractive act, but Barrett's unpredictable condition created uncertainty. Every poor performance risked damaging the band's reputation and reducing future bookings. The difficulties continued inside the recording studio. Recording sessions require concentration, patience, and consistency. Barrett had once been full of ideas, bringing songs that excited everyone around him. Now, completing even simple recordings became increasingly difficult. Producer Norman Smith, who had worked closely with Pink Floyd on their early recordings, found himself facing growing challenges. Smith admired Barrett's creativity and recognized his talent, but he also had to finish recording sessions on schedule. As Barrett became less focused, studio time was often wasted waiting for him to respond or complete basic parts. There were times when Barrett struggled to follow instructions or lost interest during recording. On some occasions, he brought in songs that changed so much from one performance to the next that the band found it difficult to record finished versions. What had once felt like exciting creativity now often created confusion. Norman Smith later spoke about the difficulties of working with Barrett during this period. Although he remained respectful of Barrett's talent, it became increasingly clear that recording new material was becoming far more complicated than before. Meanwhile, financial pressure was growing. Pink Floyd had opportunities to expand internationally, sell more records, and secure better-paying concerts. Record companies, managers, and promoters saw enormous potential in the band, but every canceled rehearsal, disappointing concert, or troubled television appearance threatened those opportunities. The other members began realizing that Barrett's condition was no longer only a personal issue, it was affecting everyone's future. This led to difficult conversations within the band. Roger Waters, Nick Mason, and Richard Wright cared deeply about Barrett. He was not just their songwriter, he was their friend. They understood that he appeared to be struggling, and none of them wanted to abandon him. At the same time, they had responsibilities to one another, to their management, and to the growing number of people whose jobs depended on the band's success. The question became impossible to avoid. Could Pink Floyd continue with Syd Barrett as its leader? At first, no one wanted to answer it. They hoped things would improve, that Barrett would recover, and that the creative spark that had built the band would return. But with each passing performance, that hope became harder to hold on to. The band slowly began discussing an idea that would have seemed unthinkable only months earlier, bringing in another guitarist to help carry the group forward. The solution they chose would change Pink Floyd forever, and it involved one of Syd Barrett's oldest friends. David Gilmour joins. By late 1967, Pink Floyd had reached a point where simply hoping things would improve was no longer enough. Syd Barrett's unpredictable behavior was affecting rehearsals, concerts, recording sessions, and business opportunities. The band still believed in his talent, but they also knew they needed a practical solution if they wanted to keep performing. That solution came in the form of someone Barrett had known for years. David Gilmour was not a stranger joining an established band. He had grown up in Cambridge, just like Barrett and Roger Waters, and he had known Syd since they were teenagers. The two shared a love for music and often played guitar together while they were still young. Friends remembered them exchanging ideas, learning songs, and encouraging each other's musical development long before either of them became famous. After leaving Cambridge, Gilmour spent time traveling through Europe, performing with different groups and developing his skills as a guitarist and singer. By the end of 1967, he had built a reputation as a talented musician with a calm personality and dependable work ethic. Those qualities made him the obvious person to call. The decision to contact Gilmour was not made because the band wanted to remove Barrett immediately. In fact, their first idea was much more cautious. They hoped Gilmour could join as a second guitarist and vocalist, helping the band during live performances, while Barrett remained an official member. The arrangement was meant to reduce the pressure on Barrett rather than replace him. If Barrett forgot lyrics, stopped playing, or struggled during a concert, Gilmour could quietly step in and keep the performance moving. The band hoped this would allow Barrett to continue contributing his songwriting while avoiding the stress of carrying every live show. On paper, it sounded like a reasonable compromise. In reality, it created an awkward situation from the very beginning. Pink Floyd suddenly had two lead guitarists, but only one of them was consistently able to perform. Barrett's role had never been limited to playing guitar. He was the band's founder, principal songwriter, lead singer on many songs, and creative leader. Adding another guitarist without clearly defining each person's responsibilities left everyone uncertain about how the group was supposed to function. During rehearsals, the tension became more obvious. Barrett often appeared increasingly disengaged. There were days when he barely participated in practice, leaving Gilmour to cover much of the guitar work. Other times, Barrett would bring in new song ideas that were unfinished or constantly changing. A melody introduced one day might be completely different the next, making it difficult for the rest of the band to learn or arrange the material. His unpredictable approach had once been seen as part of his creative process. Now it made rehearsals frustrating because no one knew whether the songs would ever be completed. The other members tried to stay patient. Still, they could not ignore what was happening. Private discussions among Waters, Mason, and Wright became more frequent. They talked about upcoming concerts, recording commitments, and the growing pressure from managers and record executives. Every conversation eventually returned to the same difficult question: could the band continue if Barrett was no longer able to perform consistently? There was no easy answer. Replacing a musician is always difficult, but replacing a close friend is something entirely different. Barrett was not simply another member who could be exchanged for someone with better technical skills. Without him, there would likely have been no Pink Floyd in the first place. That made every decision feel personal. Roger Waters later admitted that this period was emotionally painful for everyone involved. They cared about Barrett deeply, but they also felt responsible for keeping the band alive. They found themselves balancing loyalty to a friend with the reality that four people's futures depended on decisions no one wanted to make. David Gilmour also found himself in an uncomfortable position. He had enormous respect for Barrett and understood exactly how important he had been to Pink Floyd. Gilmour was not trying to take his friend's place or compete with him. Instead, he joined because the band believed they needed help, and he wanted to support people he had known for years. That made his role emotionally complicated. Every successful performance reminded him that Barrett, once the center of the band, was becoming less involved. Gilmour later spoke with sympathy about Barrett, making it clear that he never viewed the situation as a victory. Instead, he saw it as a heartbreaking chapter in the lives of people who had once shared the same dream. As rehearsals continued, it became increasingly clear that the original plan was no longer working. Barrett was contributing less, Gilmour was doing more, and the band could not continue living between two different versions of Pink Floyd. Then, one quiet decision during a drive to a concert changed everything without a single argument being spoken. The day Pink Floyd simply didn't pick Syd up. By January 1968, Pink Floyd had reached a point where the situation with Syd Barrett could no longer continue as it had for months. The band had tried to make things work by bringing David Gilmour into the group. They hoped Gilmour could support Barrett during performances while allowing him to remain part of the band he had created. But the arrangement was proving increasingly difficult. Barrett was participating less and less in rehearsals and concerts. Gilmour was taking on more responsibilities. Everyone involved could see that the band was slowly moving in a new direction, even if nobody wanted to openly admit it. Then came one of the most famous moments in rock music history. On a day in January 1968, as the band prepared for the trip, someone asked a simple question: should they pick up Syd Barrett on the way? Under normal circumstances, the answer would have been obvious. Barrett was still officially a member of Pink Floyd. He was still one of the band's founders and, in the public's eyes, remained part of the group. But this time, the response was different. According to later accounts from members of the band, someone replied with 4 words that would change everything: "Let's not bother." It was not a formal meeting. There was no vote, no written agreement, and no dramatic announcement. Yet that single decision effectively ended Syd Barrett's active role in Pink Floyd. The remarkable thing about Barrett's departure is how quietly it happened. Many famous bands experience explosive breakups filled with arguments, public accusations, or personal feuds. That was not the case here. There was no major confrontation between Barrett and the rest of the group. No one sat him down for a long discussion about his future. There was no emotional scene where friendship suddenly collapsed. Instead, the band simply stopped including him in their performances. By that point, the decision had become less about replacing Barrett and more about accepting a reality everyone had already been living with for months. His participation had become so limited that the group was already functioning largely without him. The drive to that performance merely made the situation official in practice. One of the most unusual aspects of the story is Barrett's reaction, or what appears to have been the lack of one. There is no widely documented account of Barrett angrily confronting the band or publicly protesting the decision. Friends and observers later described him as increasingly withdrawn during this period. While it is impossible to know exactly what he felt, there was no public battle between him and his former bandmates. This silence has led to decades of speculation. Some believe Barrett understood what was happening. Others think he may not have fully grasped the finality of the decision at the time. Whatever the truth may be, the separation happened with surprisingly little public drama. Soon afterward, Pink Floyd formally announced that David Gilmour had become a permanent member of the band. From a business standpoint, the group needed stability. Concerts had to be scheduled, recordings had to be completed, and promoters needed confidence that the band could perform reliably. More than half a century later, Barrett's departure remains one of the most unusual exits in rock history. There was no final concert, no public argument, and no dramatic farewell. A simple decision made during a drive to a show quietly ended one of the most important chapters in the band's history. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications.